You just close the deal with your next date. You're going to her place. She turns the lights on, and you see her bookcase on the wall. What books do you see that make you turn and leave immediately?
Scum Manifesto by Valerie Solano or some shit.
White Fragility.
Ooh, that's a good one. What's
Mein Kampf.
Yeah, definitely that one. What's the book by Karl Marx?
Anything Gary Bishop as a
The
plus.
Communist Manifesto.
The Communist Manifesto.
Let's see.
Who here believes in capitalism?
God.
Kylie, are you a capitalist?
I feel like in America, I don't really have a choice.
You don't have a choice?
We live in a capitalist society. What can I say?
Well, would you prefer it to be a different economic model?
I think that in theory, capitalism should work. I think that in order for it to work, though, you need more social provisions. I just don't think we have that right now. Obviously, I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. But in an ideal world, then yes. But
In an ideal world?
yes.
You would want what? Communism?
I think that no. You misread me completely there.
Capitalism.
I think that capitalism with the adequate social provisions should be enough to function. I think right now in the U.S. it's not, unfortunately.
Yeah, well,
don't
I think that's a
that's
mischaracterization of what we have in the U.S.
I
I think
think
it's because we've tried to institute certain social incentives that our capitalism is all messed up.
You got to go to the back if you're going to eat. Okay, we can't have it at the table. Go ahead. Sorry. That's
that's
people
fine,
are complaining in the chat.
No,
that,
I think it's because we have all of these social incentives, like the government trying to pay for school, the government trying to pay for medical, the government trying to pay for all this other stuff. Jacks prices up. So we don't really have a capitalist society. We don't really have a free market society because big businesses that suck at their job are just bailed out by the government because they're too big to fail. Whereas if it was actually capitalist, if it was actually free market, they would just be allowed to fail, and then good companies would be able to rise to the top. But we have lobbying groups, we have all of this inappropriate power that's being levied upon our free market system that makes it not so capitalist.
No, I agree with your point that we don't. I feel like when I say we live in a capitalist society, I'm referring to the fact that the U.S., the dominant ideology in the U.S. is capitalism. Okay. That's more so what I'm referring to. I think you could probably agree on that. But yeah, I agree. There's never been a truly capitalist society. Yeah. There hasn't.
I could agree that most of the people want a capitalist society because that's throughout history that's proven to be the best way to lift a country from nothing to something.
Yeah, I think when you talk about social provisions too, I agree with your point that the government shouldn't be helping like failing stuff like that. I think that there are a lot more like basic urgent needs that need to be addressed before that.
I do have to move things on. Yeah. Morgan, can I
really
read
you
this?
do? I want to get into this, but okay.
Here, let me have her read it. Let me have her read this, and then you guys can get into it for a bit.
What is this? If they will, I will. Bullet logic. One person takes the bullet to Dave the other. You gonna let your man take the shot, then jump on his dead body and get yourself murked too? Idiots.
All right, thank you, Nickelodeon. If you guys want, you can have a brief exchange.
Well, yeah, I was just curious if we could go through some of this. So, what basic needs are you talking about?
I'm talking about like addressing homelessness in the U.S. I would say like bipartisan climate solutions. I would say those are just the two off the top of my head right now.
Climate change is going to help who? What do you? So hang on. Let's back up. Hang on. Let me finish answering the question or asking the question. So when you're talking about climate change, who is this going to help? The climate change provisions, who is it going to help specifically?
Well, scientific data and peer-reviewed studies have already proven that we are seeing the effects of climate change, so it would help us currently, but increasingly so future generations. I'm talking about almost like a preservation matter at this point.
So who would it help right now?
Right now, it would help us. Do you see the amount of natural disasters that are occurring at rates that we've never seen before? The amount of people dying from heat waves? It's on the rise.
Less people dying from heat waves than have ever died in heat waves in history, that's for sure, because we have these cool things called air conditioners. But besides that, there's this other awesome fact, which is that the climate change crisis is a complete made-up fiasco. It's nonsensical, and the data models are so overtly complex that it's essentially impossible for you to draw adequate conclusions from them. As it turns out, climate's really complicated. Mm-hmm. Isn't that amazing? Super complicated. But I'm going to let that go for a second, right? I just want to know, if you were the Queen of the United States and you can have your perfect climate policy instituted, whatever that is, who would it help right now?
Who would it help right now? Okay, well, first of all, I don't think I would ever want to be Queen of the United States. Let me start
but if
off
you
with
were.
that. I'm just prefacing. I would say that if I were to implement bipartisan climate solutions right now, it would mostly focus on shifting the labor markets over to sustainable energy. So I would say right now who it would help is, in my perfect world as the Queen of the United States, it would help people who are currently working in the gas industry and fossil fuels. I would say that.
You mean those people who all have jobs?
Yes, but in my bipartisan.
How would it help them?
I would like to continue my thought without any interruptions.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm sure that you would, but I don't want you to prattle. I want to go point by point. How would it actually help people in the gas industry who are working for the gas industry?
I'm saying that in my bipartisan climate solution that I would implement, theoretically, that it would shift our industry from being fossil fuel dominant over to sustainable energy, and it would first and foremost focus on protecting the jobs of those who are in those industries right now. That's all I'm saying.
Those people who are in those industries right now already have jobs. How would this help them?
You asked me to answer a question on a hypothetical situation.
Okay, and then what was the question I asked? Okay, hang on. What was the actual question I asked you? Just repeat it back to me if you don't mind.
If you were the Queen of the U.S., who would your policies? Yeah, we've got a little off topic, Brian. If I were the Queen of the U.S. right now, who would my climate policies help right now?
Right. So who would they help right now? How would it help people who have jobs to have jobs?
I think that the U.S. systemically is so dependent on fossil fuels that I don't think that you can, from my point of view, and you don't have to agree with this, I'm not trying to force you to agree with me. I think that because our economy is so dependent on fossil fuels, that implementing like a sustainable policy like this, it wouldn't benefit anyone right now. I think I agree with your point on that. I'm talking about long-term solutions. That's more so my perspective here.
Yeah, so it wouldn't help a single person right now. So if you were the Queen of the United States, you would implement policies which wouldn't help a single fucking person right now.
I think also you're ignoring that sometimes in politics, it's not just about policies helping people short-term, that you're trying to create long-term systemic impact.
Great. Okay, well, let's get into that. So you brought up the homeless crisis in the United States. I'm not sure it's a crisis, but the homeless problem. You're the Queen of the United States. Same thing. How would you solve the problem of the homeless in the United States, even with a long-term solution?
Are you asking me, a 21-year-old college student, to solve U.S. homelessness right now?
Yes.
Can you vote?
Yes, but
Yeah, you're damn right I'm asking you the question.
You got it, Kylie.
I am a political science major.
I believe in you.
I love my political
Kylie
science
for president.
major.
I'm sorry. Hang on, Kylie. Are you allowed to vote?
Yes, I am allowed to vote.
Then yeah, I'm asking you the question. That's right.
I want to decline this question, and it's because I'm going to be honest, I truly don't think I'm equipped to solve U.S. homelessness. Crazy.
Are you going to be voting this year?
I will be voting, but I do have
and you're
going to
vote for Biden, right?
Public office ever.
You're going to be voting for Biden, right?
Decline the question.
Yeah, you're going to be voting for Biden.
You know what? Actually, Andrew, I did speak to her before the show. She said she's voting for Kanye.
I almost wore my
Brian, you weren't supposed to tell
Daddy's
anyone
home
that.
shirt.
She's voting for Kanye, Andrew. I'm sorry to ruin it.
Andrew, respectfully decline, but I do appreciate you asking me about politics.
Okay, well, let me ask you a different question. If you could have voted in the last election, who would you have voted for?
This is a very tricky question for me to answer, just because currently I do not agree with a lot of Biden's policies.
Sure, but if you could have in the last election, who would you have voted for?
I will say that given my knowledge at the time during the 2020 election, I would have voted for Biden.
Right.
Do I feel more apprehension voting for Biden now after seeing his first presidential term? Of course I do. I think a lot of people do. His approval rates are down. Trump's currently ahead in the polls.
You'll still vote for him.
Of course. But like, I think given...
All right, let's not dogpile. Let's not dogpile. But
there's no dogpile. I just wanted a quick answer to this. I had a feeling that it would have been Biden if you could have voted last time.
Yes.
But you can understand why. The reason that I ask these questions, right? And you say, if you use the cop out, well, I'm just 21 years old. It's like, okay, but you can cancel my vote. You can cancel my vote.
What state
and that is, it's sickening to me that a person if we move into a political discussion, right? And it's not even anything against you. I just don't think that 21-year-olds are smart enough to fucking vote. That you can ask them a question and they're like, I don't know, I'm only 21. It's like, well then why are you fucking voting?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What would you do to solve U.S. homelessness? What would you do?
I would reopen mental institutions, public mental institutions, and put most of them in there because that's what most of them are, is mentally ill, and they're homeless by choice. Most homeless people are homeless by choice. Or due to severe mental illness.
Would you also implement policies to ensure the continuity of care once these people were out of the mental institution?
We already had such policies, and fucking Democrats destroyed it all. The passive-aggressive, pussy-ass Democrats, with their bleeding hearts, decided that they were going to tear down the public mental institutions. The reason that they did it is because they sent a reporter went into one and found signs of abuse in one institution. And so they tore the entire thing down. That's why you have homeless people shitting on the sidewalks in San Francisco, and why you have them shitting on the sidewalks in Miami, why you have needles all over the place, is because these are literally mentally ill people and you can't do anything with them. Nothing.
I actually do agree with your point that we do need more federally funded mental health care for people who can't afford it otherwise. I will say that is a very valid point. I agree with that.
That's how you solve the problem.
Yes,
and you know what else you do? You take the VA. You take the VA and every single veteran, you make them tax exempt for life. Mm-hmm. You make them tax exempt for life, period. And you give them the finest care possible. And the way that you do that is you divert all of these pro-drug policies and the enforcement arm of the pro-drug policies, and you hand it over to the veterans. That's what you do. That's how you solve that problem, and you make sure that they get the mental health care that they need. And the ones who are not veterans, who are sitting in the streets and taking a shit, you lock them in mental institutions where they belong.
Say I agree.
That's awesome.
With your point that we do need better care for veterans. I think that I think the U.S. healthcare system is just.
It's
royally.
I do have to move things on.